The thing about humans, and I say this with the bitter taste of 3 failed dignity evaluations still fresh in my memory glands, is that they do not follow the rules. Not the social rules, not the physical rules, not even the God's blessed mathematical constants that hold our universe together. My name is Vornak. I am a Quelthian. We are known across 73 star systems as the species with the most rigorous scientific protocols. Our children recite gravitational formula before they can properly excrete waste. We do not guess. We do not approximate. We certainly do not smile while breaking the laws of physics. But I am getting ahead of myself. It started on Station Outpost Gamma 9, a trading hub that orbited a dying red giant in the Kepler expanse. The station was, to put it mildly, a dump. 37 different species crammed into corridors that smelled like burnt circuit boards and overripe Haxian fruit. I was there on assignment, documenting cargo capacity standards for the Galactic Commerce Bureau. Thrilling work, truly. The cargo bay in question was Dock 17. The foreman was a Bracthy named Gulvin. 4 arms, mandibles that clicked when he was annoyed, which was always. He ran his operation at the efficiency of a broken quantum calculator. You see that container? Gulvin gestured with 2 of his arms at a massive shipping unit sitting on the loading platform. 18,000 kilograms, packed with industrial synthesizers bound for the mining colonies. No loader can move it. Too heavy. We need to wait for the gravitational redistributor to cycle back online. I made a note on my datapad. Standard protocol violation. The weight exceeded safe manual handling limits by 400%. This would go in my report with a strong recommendation for immediate operational suspension. Then the human walked in. Now I had seen humans before. They were relatively new to the galactic stage, having achieved faster than light travel only 60 years prior. Curious species. Soft, squishy, no natural armor, no venom sacs, no psionic abilities. They compensated with what they called determination and coffee, neither of which appeared in any xenobiology database worth consulting. This particular human was named Jake. Just Jake. Not Jake, of the Highland clan, or Jake, bearer of the 7th protocol. Just Jake. He wore a worn jumpsuit covered in grease stains and a cap with some incomprehensible human symbol on it. "Hey Gully," Jake said, walking up with his hands in his pockets like he owned the station. "Heard you got a heavy one." Gulvin's mandibles clicked rapidly. "The redistributor is offline. We wait. Regulations state very clearly that organic beings cannot attempt to move loads exceeding their body weight by more than a factor of 3. That container is easily 200 times your mass. Human." Jake looked at the container. Then he looked at Gulvin. "Then and I will never forget this." He smiled. Not a nervous smile, not an apologetic smile. A smile that suggested he knew something the universe did not. 200 times, huh? Jake walked over to the container, rolling his shoulders. "Yeah, that sounds about right." I felt compelled to intervene. "Human Jake, I am Vornak of the Quelthian Standards Board. The regulations exist for biological safety. Your skeletal structure cannot possibly withstand the compressive forces required to move such mass." Jake glanced at me. "You one of those guys who likes math?" "I am a scientist. Mathematics is the language of reality itself." "Cool, cool. Watch this." What happened next violated approximately 17 laws of physics that I could count, and possibly more that I was too shocked to catalog properly. Jake bent down. He gripped the bottom edge of the container with his fingers. His legs, those absurdly designed bipedal support structures, began to straighten. The container, all 18,000 kilograms of it, lifted off the ground. Not smoothly, not elegantly. The human was shaking. His face turned an alarming shade of red, and he made a noise somewhere between a growl and controlled explosion. But the container rose. Centimeter by centimeter it came off the loading platform. Gulvin's mandibles froze mid-click. My datapad fell from my gripping appendage and clattered on the deck. Jake took one step forward, then another. He was carrying 18,000 kilograms like a particularly angry piece of furniture. Sweat poured down his face. The muscles in his neck looked like they were attempting to escape his body, but he kept moving. "Where do you want it?" he grunted. Gulvin pointed weakly at a spot 15 meters away. Jake walked the entire distance. When he reached the designated area, he set the container down with a metallic thunk that echoed through the bay. Then he straightened up, wiped his forehead, and cracked his knuckles in a way that made my sensory organs retract involuntarily. There you go, buddy. Anything else? I found my voice, though it came out approximately 3 octaves higher than normal. That is impossible, structurally impossible. Your bones should have shattered, your muscular tissue should have torn, your circulatory system should have collapsed under the pressure differential. Jake shrugged. Yeah, probably should have warmed up first. Gonna feel that tomorrow. He patted Golden on one of his shoulders. Let me know if you need anything else moved, golly. I'm off shift in 20, but I can come back after lunch. He walked away, whistling some tuneless human melody. Golden and I stood in silence for approximately 40 seconds. Did that actually happen? Golden finally asked. I checked my visual recording implants. According to my documentation systems, yes. Reality appears to have suffered a temporary malfunction. Should we report this? Report what? That a human violated the fundamental principles of biological mechanics? They will think we have developed a shared hallucination disorder. But here is what bothered me. What kept my analysis cortex cycling through scenarios for the next 72 hours. Jake had smiled. Not after the feat, not in boastful triumph, but before, as if the impossible was simply inconvenient, not insurmountable, as if the universe was negotiable. This should have been my first warning. This should have been the moment I requested immediate reassignment to a species that understood their limitations. Instead, I did what any rational scientist would do. I became obsessed. Over the following weeks, I began documenting human physical capabilities, with the dedication of someone hunting for proof that reality still made sense. I followed Jake around the station like a particularly annoying shadow. He thought it was hilarious. I thought it was essential research. So let me get this straight, Jake said one day as we sat in the station cafeteria, him eating something he called a burrito that looked structurally unsound. You want to test how much I can lift? Yes. Under controlled conditions. With proper measurement equipment, I need to understand the mechanism by which you achieve such feats. The mechanism is called working out at the gym, buddy. Plus genetics, I guess. My dad was a construction worker. Strong guy. That explains nothing. Your species has no genetic modifications on record, no cybernetic enhancements, no cyanotic amplification. You are baseline biological organisms. You should be weak. Jake took a massive bite of his burrito. Somehow, despite all laws of structural engineering, it did not fall apart. Want to know a secret, Vornak? Desperately. He leaned in, grinning. Humans don't know they should be weak. Nobody told us there were supposed to be limits, so we just keep pushing until something works or we pass out. That is the most horrifying survival strategy I have ever heard. Yeah, seems to work pretty good. I arranged the testing for the following week. I requisitioned equipment from 7 different departments. I filed approximately 900 forms. I may have used my position to bypass several bureaucratic protocols. Science demands sacrifice. The testing bay was on level 42, normally used for stress testing cargo container materials. I had set up measurement fields, gravitational sensors, skeletal integrity scanners, everything necessary to document exactly how human biology achieved the impossible. Jake showed up wearing shorts and a sleeveless shirt, carrying a bottle of water. This is your testing attire? I asked. Yeah. You want me to lift stuff, right? Gotta be comfortable. I had assumed you would require protective equipment, exoskeleton support, perhaps localized gravity reduction. Nah, just need some chalk for grip. I gestured to the weights I had arranged. Standard Galactic testing equipment, calibrated to universal mass standards. The smallest was 50 kilograms. The largest was 2,000. Beyond that was an industrial loader component I had requisitioned, massing approximately 8,000 kilograms. We will begin with baseline measurements, I explained. Lifting the 50-kilogram mass will establish your standard capacity. Then we will incrementally increase until we reach your maximum threshold. Jake walked past the 50-kilogram weight, past the 100, past the 500. He stopped at the 2,000-kilogram mass. Let us start with this one, he said. That is 30 times your body mass. The recommendation is to begin with lighter loads to prevent injury. Vornak. Buddy, I lifted 18,000 kilograms 3 weeks ago. 2,000 is practically a warm-up. He bent down, gripped the mass, and lifted it over his head in one smooth motion. Then he did it again and again. He performed what humans call repetitions, as if repeatedly violating physics would somehow make it more acceptable. My sensors were screaming. His skeletal structure should have compressed. His muscular tissue should have entered failure cascade. His cardiovascular system should have shut down in protest. Instead, he set the weight down and rolled his shoulders. Okay, that is actually pretty light. What else you got? I pointed weakly at the industrial loader component. Jake's eyes lit up. Actually lit up, like someone had offered him valuable currency. Oh, now we are talking. That is a nice chunk of metal right there. That is 8,000 kilograms of reinforced duralloy. It is not designed to be moved by organic being. Everything is designed to be moved if you are stubborn enough. He approached the component, circled it, studied it like a predator examining prey. Then he bent down, worked his hands underneath, adjusted his stance, and lifted. The loader component came off the ground. Jake was shaking again, his entire body engaged in what appeared to be a negotiation with gravity, but he held 8,000 kilograms in a standing position for approximately 6 seconds before setting it down with a controlled release. He was breathing heavily, but he was smiling again. That smile, that insufferable physics-defying smile. Your turn, he said between breaths. I beg your pardon. Come on, give it a try, you might surprise yourself. I am a Quelthian. Our species excels at intellectual pursuits, not manual labor. My maximum lifting capacity is approximately 15% of my body mass, which is well within established biological norms. Yeah, but have you ever actually tried to lift something heavier? There would be no point. The outcome is predetermined by physiological limitations. That is what makes you different from us. Vornak. Jake sat down on the loader component like it was casual furniture. You guys figure out what is impossible and then stop. We figure out what is impossible and then try anyway, just to see what happens. Sometimes we die, but sometimes we lift 8,000 kilograms and feel awesome. That is insane. Yeah, but it is also kind of fun. I did not attempt to lift the loader component. I had some dignity left, even if my understanding of physics did not, but I continued my observations. Jake was not unique. I soon learned. There were 17 other humans on Station Outpost Gamma 9, and they all exhibited the same disturbing tendency to ignore their biological limitations. There was a human woman named Rita, who could run for distances that should have resulted in complete cardiovascular collapse. She did it for recreation, which was apparently a human concept meaning voluntarily suffering for entertainment. There was a human named Chen who could survive on 4 hours of sleep per night while working 12-hour shifts in the reactor maintenance bay. When I asked how he managed this without entering neurological shutdown, he said, and I quote, "Red Bull and spite. I still do not know what a Red Bull is. I am afraid to ask." There was a human named Kowalski, who once got his arm caught in a cargo loader. The mechanical press should have crushed every bone in his limb. Instead, he reported to medical with just a fracture and was back at work in 6 weeks. The medical staff were still trying to figure out how his calcium-based skeletal structure had withstood 30,000 newtons of force. The more I documented, the more disturbed I became. Humans were not simply strong. They were irrationally, impossibly resilient. They recovered from injuries that would kill most species. They adapted to environments that should have been lethal. They functioned under stress conditions that would send other beings into immediate system failure. And they did it all with that same casual confidence, as if the universe was a suggestion rather than a rule. My reports back to the Quelthian Standards Board became increasingly desperate in tone. I was no longer documenting cargo capacity violations. I was documenting a fundamental threat to our understanding of biological reality. The response from my superiors was less than helpful. Investigator Vornak, your recent communications have raised concerns about your mental stability. Please report for psychological evaluation at your earliest convenience. Also, please stop referring to humans as walking physics violations. It is unnecessarily inflammatory. I was not being inflammatory. I was being accurate. But my obsession was vindicated 6 months later when the incident occurred. The incident that would prove that human capabilities were not just unusual but strategically significant. Station Outpost Gamma 9 was attacked. The raiders were Kresh, a species of opportunistic pirates who specialized in hitting remote trading posts. They had 3 ships, moderate weapons, and absolutely no idea what they were about to encounter. The station's defensive systems engaged immediately. but the Kresh had brought jamming equipment. Communications were down. The automated turrets were cycling through reboot protocols. The security forces were scrambling to organize a response. In short, we were in significant trouble. I was in my quarters when the alarm sounded, reviewing documentation on human cardiovascular endurance. The station shuddered as something exploded in the docking sector. My first thought was to proceed to the designated evacuation shelter, as per standard emergency protocols. My second thought was that the evacuation shelter was 6 levels away, and the corridor outside was already filled with panicking species from 9 different worlds. My third thought was interrupted by my door being forcibly opened. Jake stood in the doorway, wearing what appeared to be improvised armor made from cargo plating and holding a plasma torch like a weapon. "Vornak, we have got a situation. I am aware. The evacuation protocols state very clearly that we should proceed to level 19 shelter facilities in an orderly fashion. Yeah, the Kresh raiders are between us and level 19. New plan. We are going to fight. I am a documentation specialist. I do not fight. I observe and record." "Great, you can observe and record me beating the living hell out of some pirates. Come on." He grabbed my primary gripping appendage and pulled me into the corridor. I had no choice but to follow, mostly because humans have a grip strength that should probably be classified as a weapon. The corridor was chaos, species running in all direction, urgency lighting casting everything in red. Somewhere in the distance the sound of plasma fire and screaming. Jake moved through it all with purpose, pulling me behind him. We reached a junction where the corridor split 3 ways. "Listen up, everyone," Jake shouted over the noise, his voice carried with surprising authority. "Raiders are coming from the docking sector. We have got about 5 minutes before they reach this level. Anyone who wants to fight, follow me. Anyone who wants to hide, there is a maintenance closet on level 28 that is probably safe. Choose now." Approximately 30 beings stared at him like he had lost his mind. Then Rita stepped forward. "I am it." Chen appeared from a side corridor. "Got some tools that can work as weapons. Let us do this." Kabulowski emerged from the crowd, his previously fractured arm apparently fully functional again. "About time something interesting happened around here." One by one, the humans on the station formed up behind Jake. All 17 of them, armed with improvised weapons, wearing whatever protective gear they could find, looking absolutely ridiculous and somehow terrifying at the same time. "Anyone else?" Jake asked the crowd. A Brakthi engineer named Sheshik raised 2 of his arms. "This is madness. You are going to get yourselves killed." "Maybe, but at least we will die doing something instead of hiding in a closet. Last chance, folks." No one else volunteered. The rational species of the galaxy knew their limitations. The humans did not care. "All right, team," Jake said, grinning that insufferable grin. "Let us go introduce these raiders to a concept called bad life choices." They moved toward the docking sector with coordinated efficiency that suggested they had done this before, which was terrifying in its own right. I followed because someone needed to document this for the historical record. Also because Jake still had hold of my appendage, and I did not think he was going to let go. We reached the docking sector through a maintenance tunnel. The raiders had breached Dock 12 and were spreading through the station in organized groups. Professional, efficient, heavily armed. The humans attacked from 3 directions simultaneously. What happened next was not a battle. It was a demonstration in applied human stubbornness. Rita moved faster than the Kresh could track, disarming 2 raiders before they realized they were under attack. Chen used a plasma welder with surgical precision, melting weapons and armor with equal efficiency. Kowalski simply picked up a raider, all 300 kilograms of scaled warrior, and threw him into 2 of his companions. Jake waded into the center of the group, wielding his plasma torch like some ancient human weapon. He was not elegant. He was not efficient. He was absolutely relentless. A Kresh warrior twice his size tried to tackle him. Jake grabbed the raider by his armor plating and, in defiance of at least 4 laws of physics I could name, threw him against the bulkhead had enough to dent the metal. "You picked the wrong station," Jake said cheerfully while dodging plasma fire. "We have got 17 humans here, and we are all having a really bad day." The Kresh tried to regroup. The humans did not give them time. They pressed the attack with the kind of coordination that should have required months of training. Later I learned they had simply made a group chat and were coordinating in real time through their personal communication devices. They called it tactical texting. I called it insanity. Within 20 minutes, The raiders in our sector were subdued. Within an hour, the humans had cleared 3 additional levels. Within 2 hours, the Kresh commander was demanding to negotiate a retreat. Jake stood in the command center, covered in soot and coolant fluid, grinning at the view screen where the raider commander's face showed a mix of confusion and fear. "You attacked a station with humans on it," Jake explained slowly, as if talking to a child. "That is your mistake right there. We do not really do the whole being conquered thing. It is a cultural thing. You understand?" The Kresh commander's voice came through, filtered and distorted. "Your species is insane. Yeah, we get that a lot. Now you are going to leave. You are going to tell every other raider group out here that Station Outpost Gamma 9 is off limits, and you are going to compensate us for the damage. Otherwise, we are going to board your ships, and trust me, you do not want us getting creative in zero-gravity combat. You cannot board our ships. They are 3 kilometers away." Rita stepped into view of the camera, still breathing hard from the fighting. "Want to bet? I can hold my breath for 4 minutes. That is plenty of time to reach your ships and start breaking things." The Kresh commander looked at her, looked at Jake, looked at the 17 humans who had just repelled a coordinated raid by trained warriors. "We are leaving. Keep your cursed station." The communication cut out. Within minutes, the Kresh ships were accelerating away from the station at maximum burn. The command center erupted in cheers. Multiple species who had been hiding in maintenance closets began emerging, looking shocked that they were still alive. Jake turned to me, that smile still plastered on his face. "So, Vornak, you get all that documented? This is going in your report, right?" I stared at him. At all of them. These impossible, ridiculous, physics-defying beings who had just defended an entire station with improvised weapons and sheer belligerence. "Yes," I said quietly. "This will definitely be in my report." And it was. 7,000 words of detailed documentation about human combat capabilities, strategic thinking, and apparent immunity to rational fear. I submitted it to the Quelthian Standards Board with a recommendation that was very simple. Do not underestimate humans, ever. 3 weeks later, I received a response. It contained a new assignment. The Galactic Council wanted me to continue my research on human capabilities, but with a broader scope. They wanted to understand not just how humans could be impossible, but why. They wanted to know if other species could learn to think like humans, to push past their limitations, to smile at the impossible and try anyway. I accepted the assignment, mostly because I was too invested to stop now, but also because, and I will deny this if questioned, I had started to find that human perspective almost appealing. Maybe the universe was negotiable after all. Maybe limitations were just suggestions waiting to be tested. Maybe, just maybe, the rest of us had spent so long calculating what was impossible that we forgot to try. I found Jake in the cargo bay a few days after the raid, back to his normal work routine like nothing had happened. He was loading containers with casual efficiency, humming another one of those tuneless human melodies. "So," I said, approaching carefully, "I have been assigned to continue studying your species. The Council wants to understand human capabilities more thoroughly." Jake set down a container that probably massed more than any 3 other species could lift. "Oh yeah? What do you want to know?" "Everything. How your species developed such resilience. What cultural factors contribute to your refusal to accept limitations. Whether these traits can be taught to other species. I need comprehensive data." "That is a lot of questions, buddy. I have a lot of time. And apparently you humans are worth the investment." Jake grinned. That insufferable, physics-defying grin. "Tell you what, you keep hanging around asking your questions, running your tests. I will keep lifting things that should probably be left on the ground. Deal." "Deal." We shook appendages. His grip was firm enough to crack lesser species' support structures. I barely felt it anymore. As I walked away, datapad in hand, already composing my next report, I realized something that should have terrified me but somehow did not. I was starting to think like a human. I was starting to see impossibility as negotiable, and you know what? It felt absolutely terrifying, and somehow exhilarating at the same time. Perhaps that was the real human superpower. Not their strength or resilience or ridiculous pain tolerance, but their ability to make others believe that the impossible was just inconvenient. And maybe, just maybe, that would change everything. The Galactic Council meeting chamber was exactly as pretentious as I expected. vaulted ceilings that served no practical purpose in zero gravity, lighting that cast dramatic shadows across the assembled representatives, and enough formal protocol to choke a Haxian swamp beast. I hated it immediately. My presentation was scheduled for the third rotation, which meant I had to sit through 2 hours of the Vrelinian trade representative arguing about tariff adjustments on imported crystalline matrices. Riveting stuff. I spent the time reviewing my data and wondering if humans had infected me with their tendency towards sarcasm. When my turn finally came, I approached the central podium with my documentation loaded and my sensory organs prepared for skepticism. The council consisted of representatives from 47 species, most of whom thought humans were a curious anomaly at best and a potential threat at worst. Time to change some minds. Honored council members, I began, projecting my voice across the chamber. I am Vornak of the Quelthian Standards Board. For the past 8 months, I have been conducting comprehensive research on human physical and psychological capabilities. My findings suggest that our current threat assessment models are catastrophically inadequate. A Vrelian counselor, 6 eyes arranged in a vertical line, blinked in what I had learned was their species' version of dismissive amusement. Investigator Vornak, we have reviewed your linear report. While human strength-to-mass ratios are admittedly unusual, we failed to see how this constitutes a strategic concern. They are a young species with limited territory and no significant military infrastructure. With respect, Counselor Threxis, you are missing the point entirely. Human capabilities are not simply about physical strength. They represent a fundamentally different approach to biological limitations. I activated the holo display. Images of Jake lifting the 18,000-kilogram container appeared, along with sensor readouts showing stress levels that should have resulted in immediate skeletal failure. This human, designation Jake Collins, lifted a mass approximately 270 times his body weight. His skeletal structure experienced compression forces of 68,000 newtons. According to every biological model we possess, he should have died. Instead, he walked 15 meters and then asked if there was anything else that needed moving. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several counselors leaned forward, their attention finally engaged. I continued. But this is merely the surface observation. The truly significant factor is psychological. Humans do not simply push past their limitations through superior biology. They push past their limitations because they refuse to acknowledge those limitations exist. Another image appeared. Rita running her impossible distances, heart rate elevated to levels that should trigger immediate cardiac arrest in any rational species. Humans possess what they call an override system. When their bodies signal danger, when their biology screams for them to stop, they have developed the capacity to simply ignore those signals and continue. They call it pushing through the pain. We would call it voluntary self-destruction, except they do not actually destroy themselves. They adapt. A Quelthian counselor, one of my own species, raised a gripping appendage. Investigator, are you suggesting that humans have evolved the ability to rewrite their biological constraints in real time? Not exactly, counselor. They have evolved the stubbornness to ignore their biological constraints until their biology has no choice but to adapt or fail. And their biology, for reasons I am still attempting to document, chooses to adapt with disturbing frequency. I pulled up the next data set. Medical scans from Kowalski's arm injury, showing bone density increasing by 47% during the healing process. This human fractured his radius and ulna in a cargo loader accident. Standard healing time for such injuries across most species is 12 to 16 weeks, with permanent structural weakness. This human was back at full capacity in 6 weeks, and his bones are now demonstrably stronger than before the injury. His body treated catastrophic damage as an opportunity for improvement. The chamber fell silent. I had their attention now. The Kresh raid on Station Outpost Gamma 9 provided additional data. 17 humans, armed with improvised weapons and zero formal military training, repelled a coordinated attack by 63 trained Kresh raiders. Casualty ratio was 42-0 in favor of the humans. None of the humans died. 12 required medical attention. All returned to duty within 72 hours. I paused, letting that sink in. Here is what concerns me. Honored Council, we have spent millennia developing our civilizations based on understanding and accepting our limitations. We build technology to compensate for our biological constraints. We create social structures that distribute labor according to capability. We are rational. We are efficient. We are predictable. Another pause. Humans are none of those things. They look at limitations and treat them as personal insults. They encounter impossibility and take it as a challenge. They fail, recover, and attempt the same impossible task again with more enthusiasm. This is not rational behavior. This is not efficient. This is absolutely not predictable. I advance to my final slide. A simple graph showing human territorial expansion over the last 60 years compared to other species at equivalent developmental stages. In 6 decades, humans have established colonies on 17 worlds, many of which we classified as uninhabitable. They are currently attempting to terraform a planet with surface temperatures that would boil Vrellinian blood. Their projected timeline for completion is 80 years. Our models suggest it should take 400 years, if it is even possible. When I asked the human project coordinator how they plan to achieve this, he said, "And I have the recording, we will figure it out as we go." That is kind of our thing. Several counselors made sounds of distress. My recommendation is this, I concluded. We need to establish formal protocols for human integration into galactic society. Not because they are a threat in the traditional sense, but because their very existence challenges our fundamental understanding of what is possible. And if history has taught us anything, it is that humans have a disturbing tendency to be contagious. Counselor Threxis spoke again, his tone less dismissive now. Contagious how? Exactly. Other species who spend significant time around humans begin exhibiting similar behavioral patterns. They attempt tasks previously deemed impossible. They push past accepted limitations. They start asking what if instead of why not. They have documented 17 cases of non-human personnel on Station Outpost Gamma 9 exceeding their established capability thresholds after extended human contact. I paused, then added quietly, I may be one of those cases. The chamber erupted in multiple languages simultaneously. It took the council speaker 4 attempts to restore order. After 2 hours of debate, the council issued a directive. Establish a formal human integration study program. Assign resources. Gather data. Determine if human psychological patterns could be beneficial or dangerous to galactic stability. They put me in charge. Naturally, 3 months later, I found myself on Earth. Actual Earth. Homeworld of the species that had turned my entire understanding of biology into a joke. The planet was aggressively average. 1 star, 1 moon, standard gravity, oxygen, nitrogen atmosphere. Nothing remarkable. Yet this was the world that had produced a species capable of collective insanity on a civilization-wide scale. My guide was a human woman named Dr. Keiko Yamada, a xenobiologist who specialized in comparative species studies. She met me at the spaceport in what she called casual clothes, which appeared to be synthetic fabric designed for comfort rather than protection. No armor, no environmental suit, just fabric and confidence. "Welcome to Earth, Vornak," she said, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. I had learned to tolerate the hand-shaking ritual, although it still felt unnecessarily aggressive. "I have got quite the itinerary planned for you. We are going to visit a gym, a hospital, a military training facility, and if we have time, a children's playground." Why a children's playground? Because that is where humans first learn to do stupid, dangerous things and survive. Might as well see where it starts. She was joking. I think with humans, it was often difficult to tell. The first stop was indeed a gymnasium, a massive facility filled with equipment designed specifically for humans to voluntarily damage their bodies in controlled environments. I watched approximately 200 humans engaged in various forms of ritualized suffering. They lifted weights that should have crushed them. They ran on machines that simulated endless forward motion. They contorted their bodies into positions that looked medically inadvisable. And they did all of this willingly, many of them appearing to enjoy the experience. "This is your exercise culture," I observed, documenting everything on my datapad. "You intentionally stress your biological systems to the point of failure as recreation." "Not failure," Keiko corrected. "We stress them to the point just before failure. That is where growth happens. You break down muscle tissue through exercise, it rebuilds stronger. You stress your cardiovascular system, it adapts and improves. You push your limits expand." That sounds like a medical horror show, or efficient self-improvement. Perspective matters. We watched a human male attempting to lift a barbell loaded with what my scanner indicated was 300 kilograms. He failed on his first attempt, failed on his second. On his third attempt with assistance from a companion, he successfully lifted the mass. Instead of looking defeated by his initial failures, he was grinning. "You see that?" Kiko pointed. "That is a human who just failed twice and is happy about it. You know why? Irrational optimism? Progress. He failed less on the third attempt than the first. Failure is just data. It tells you where your current limits are so you know what to push against next time." We moved to another section where a human woman was running on an inclined platform, her heart rate displayed on a monitor showing numbers that would send most species into emergency shutdown. "How long has she been running?" I asked. Keiko checked the machine's display. "About 40 minutes, she has probably got another 20 to go. That is suicide. That is marathon training. She is probably preparing for a race where she will run 42 kilometers in one session." Why would anyone voluntarily run 42 kilometers? To see if they can. Also, there is usually a medal at the end. A medal. You risk catastrophic biological failure for decorative medal. Well, when you put it that way, it does sound silly. But it is not really about the medal. It is about proving to yourself that you can do something hard, that you can push past what you thought was possible and come out stronger on the other side. I was starting to understand, which was disturbing because understanding humans meant accepting that sanity was negotiable. The hospital visit was equally enlightening and horrifying. I observed surgical procedures, reviewed recovery protocols, and interviewed medical staff about human healing capabilities. A doctor named Patterson showed me case files that defied medical logic. A patient who had recovered from a fall that should have been fatal. Another who had survived exposure to temperatures that should have caused immediate organ failure. A child who had been clinically dead for 6 minutes and made a full recovery with no brain damage. "How?" I asked simply. Dr. Patterson shrugged. A gesture I had learned meant I do not know, but I have accepted it. "Human biology is remarkably resilient. We have redundant systems, adaptive immune responses, and a healing capacity that still surprises us. Plus stubbornness. Never underestimate the role of sheer stubbornness in recovery. Stubbornness is not a medical mechanism. Tell that to my patients. I have seen people survive because they were too angry to die. I have seen recovery times cut in half because the patient had something they refused to miss. Wedding, graduation, birth of a grandchild, whatever. They decide they are going to be there, and their body somehow cooperates. That should not work. And yet it does. Repeatedly. The military facility was where things became genuinely concerning from a strategic standpoint. I observed training exercises that would qualify as war crimes if inflicted on most species. Sleep deprivation, physical exhaustion, psychological stress, all deliberately imposed on recruits to push them past their breaking points. And the recruits kept going. A training instructor named Sergeant Okoye explained the philosophy while we watched recruits crawling through mud under simulated weapons fire. "We are not trying to make them superhuman," she said. "We are showing them that the limits they think they have are mostly mental. Your body can do way more than your brain thinks it can. Fear and discomfort are just signals. You can acknowledge the signals and keep moving anyway. But why make training so unnecessarily difficult? You could achieve the same physical conditioning with less psychological trauma. Because when the actual crisis comes, they need to know they can function under stress. They need to have already experienced their worst day and survived it. That is what builds confidence. Not avoiding difficulty, but conquering it." I watched a recruit fall during an obstacle course, get back up and try again. Failed twice more, succeeded on the fourth attempt. Her companions cheered. They celebrate failure, I observed. They celebrate effort. Failure means you tried something hard. Success means you overcame something hard. Both are worth acknowledging. The children's playground was perhaps the most disturbing location because it revealed that humans started their insanity early. Children, small humans with even less developed survival instincts, climbed on structures designed to be challenging, swung from bars that could result in falls, slid down inclined surfaces at velocities that could cause injury. And the adult humans supervising them encouraged this behavior. "This seems negligent," I commented to Keiko as we watched a small human climb to the top of a 3-meter structure. "It is calculated risk. Yes, they might fall, might get hurt, might cry, but they will also learn their physical capabilities, develop confidence, and understand that taking risks can result in achievement. We do not wrap our children in protective barriers. We let them explore, fail, learn, and try again. What if they get seriously injured? Then we treat the injury, and they learn to be more careful. Or they do not learn and try the same thing again with better technique. Either way, they are learning. The small human reached the top of the structure, stood up, and raised both arms in triumph. Other small humans below made sounds of approval. That child just risked significant injury for social approval from peers, I said. That child just conquered a personal challenge and felt proud of themselves. Perspective, Vornak. It is all about perspective. Over the following weeks, I traveled across Earth, documenting human culture, psychology, and capability. I visited factories where humans worked in conditions that should have been automated. I attended sporting events where humans competed in activities that seemed designed to maximize injury potential. I observed family units where adult humans taught smaller humans to overcome challenges through encouragement rather than elimination of obstacles. A pattern emerged. Humans did not avoid difficulty, they sought it out. They created artificial challenges when natural ones were insufficient. They turned survival into sport, hardship into entertainment, impossibility into aspiration. And they did it all with that same casual confidence, as if the universe owed them nothing but they were going to take everything anyway. I compiled my findings into a comprehensive report, 10,000 pages of documentation, analysis, and recommendations. The core conclusion was simple but revolutionary. Human capability was not primarily biological, it was philosophical. They believed limitations were temporary. They believed impossibility was situational. They believed that effort and stubbornness could overcome nearly anything. And because they believed these things, they acted accordingly, and their biology had no choice but to keep up or fail. And their biology very rarely failed. I submitted the report to the Galactic Council with a single recommendation. Do not try to contain human expansion. Do not try to regulate human behavior. Instead, learn from it, because the alternative was being left behind by a species that refused to accept that being left behind was possible. The Council response came 3 weeks later. They were establishing a new program. Cultural exchange between humans and other species, shared training facilities, joint research projects. The goal was to determine if human psychological patterns could be safely integrated into other cultures. They wanted volunteers from other species willing to undergo human-style training and conditioning, to push past their accepted limitations, to try the impossible and document the results. I volunteered immediately. So did Gulven, the Brakthi foreman from Station Outpost Gamma 9. So did Shesik, the engineer who had called the humans insane during the Kresh raid. So did 237 other beings from 41 different species. Apparently, humans were more contagious than I thought. The training facility was established on a neutral world, staffed by human instructors and equipped with everything necessary to push non-human species past their comfort zones. I reported for the first session with equal parts scientific curiosity and existential dread. Jake was there. Of course Jake was there. He had been recruited as a lead instructor, probably because he embodied every human trait the program was meant to study. Vornak, he said, grinning that insufferable grin, ready to lift some heavy things. I am here to document the psychological effects of human training methodologies on non-human species. My personal participation is purely for research authenticity. Sure, buddy. Whatever helps you sleep at night. Let us start with something simple. That weight over there, 50 kilograms. I want you to lift it over your head. I looked at the weight, calculated the mass-to-strength ratio, ran the numbers through my neural processor. That is 3.7 times my body mass. Quelthian physiology cannot generate sufficient force to achieve overhead lift of such mass. Have you tried? The mathematical models clearly indicate that it is impossible. Yeah, but have you actually tried? I stared at him. He stared back, still smiling. This was it. The moment where I either accepted my limitations and maintained my dignity, or I attempted something impossible and proved I had been infected by human insanity. I approached the weight. My sensory organs calculated angles, leverage points, force distribution. Everything indicated failure. But humans did not let calculations stop them. They tried anyway. I gripped the weight, adjusted my stance, engaged my muscular systems, lifted. The weight came off the ground. Not smoothly, not easily. Every fiber in my body screamed in protest. But it moved. Centimeters at first, then more. I got it to chest height before my grip failed, and I had to set it down. I had not lifted it overhead, but I had lifted it higher than any Quelthian had ever lifted anything. Jake was still smiling. See? You did not lift it all the way, but you lifted it further than you thought you could. Progress. That is what we are looking for. Try it again tomorrow, then the next day. Keep trying. Eventually you will get it overhead. Want to know how I know? How? Because you just proved to yourself that impossible is negotiable. Once you know that, everything changes. He was right. Everything had changed. Over the next 6 months, I trained alongside beings from dozens of species. We lifted weights that should have crushed us. We ran distances that should have killed us. We pushed past our established limitations and discovered that those limitations were more flexible than we had believed. Not all of us succeeded. Some species hit hard biological walls that stubbornness could not overcome. But even those failures provided valuable data. We learned where the boundaries actually were, as opposed to where we assumed they were. And in most cases, the actual boundaries were much further out than the assumed ones. I eventually lifted that 50-kilogram weight overhead. It took me 4 months of training, 3 pulled muscle groups, and more frustration than I had experienced in my entire previous life. But I did it. Jake was there when I succeeded. He did not make a big deal of it, just nodded, smiled, and said, "Knew you could. What do you want to try next?" Because that was the other thing I learned from humans. Success was not the end. It was just a new baseline, a new starting point for the next challenge. The cultural exchange program expanded rapidly. Within a year, there were 50 training facilities across 15 worlds. Thousands of non-human beings learning to think like humans, to push like humans, to smile at impossibility like it was a particularly amusing joke. Not everyone approved. Conservative factions across multiple species raised concerns about the psychological effects, the potential for injury, the fundamental change to species identity. They argued that we were abandoning what made us unique in favor of becoming poor imitations of humans. They were not entirely wrong, but they were not entirely right either. We were not becoming human. We were becoming something new. Species who understood their limitations but chose to test them anyway. Beings who could calculate the probability of failure and attempt the task regardless. Cultures that valued effort and progress over safety and stagnation. The humans called it growth mindset. I called it voluntary insanity with beneficial side effects. 2 years after that first meeting in the cargo bay, I returned to Station Outpost Gamma 9. The place had changed. Where before different species had worked in isolated groups according to their capabilities, now they collaborated on tasks that required pushing past individual limitations. I watched a Vrelian engineer working alongside a human to repair a cargo loader. The Vrelian was attempting to hold a structural component that exceeded their species' documented strength capacity. 6 months ago, this would have been impossible. Now the Vrelian braced, lifted and held the component steady while the human secured it in place. Small victories, but they accumulated. I found Jake in his usual spot. The cargo bay, loading containers with mechanical efficiency. He had been promoted to station logistics coordinator but still spent half his shifts doing manual labor because, as he explained, sitting at a desk makes me twitchy. For Vornak, he said, setting down a container. How was Earth? Educationally traumatic, also productive. My report has been distributed to all council members. Early feedback suggests they are cautiously optimistic about the cultural exchange program. Cautiously optimistic. That is the most alien phrase I have ever heard. Humans would just say this might work and start doing it. Yes, well, some of us prefer to maintain a veneer of scientific rigor even while doing objectively insane things. Jake laughed. Actually laughed, the sound echoing through the cargo bay. You have changed, buddy. When I first met you, you would have never admitted that anything you did was insane. When I first met you, I believed reality was fixed and limitations were absolute. You have systematically destroyed both of those beliefs through repeated demonstration that physics is apparently negotiable. Physics is not negotiable, we just push it really hard and see what happens. That is the same thing. Maybe. Does it matter? I considered the question. 2 years ago, I would have said yes. Precision of language matters. Accuracy of definition matters. understanding the difference between impossible and highly improbable matters. Now I was not so sure. I lifted a 50-kilogram weight overhead last month, I said instead of answering. Jake's face lit up. No kidding? Vornak, that is amazing. Did you record it for documentation? Obviously, it is in my report under Appendix 17, Unexpected Personal Capability Development. You are such a nerd. I love it. What are you going to try next? Actually, I was hoping you might have suggestions. I have mastered the basic lifting protocols. I have improved my cardiovascular endurance by 37%. I am ready for a new challenge. Jake thought for a moment, then grinned. That grin. I knew that grin. That was the grin that meant I was about to do something that past me would have considered suicidal. How do you feel about rock climbing? He asked. Is that where humans voluntarily scale vertical surfaces using only their gripping appendages and questionable judgment? That is exactly what it is. There is a great facility on level 30. Artificial walls, safety equipment, the whole setup. We could go after shift. 2 years ago I would have declined, calculated the risk, determined it was unacceptable and returned to my documentation. But that was 2 years ago. Before I learned that impossible was negotiable. Before I understood that limitations were often self-imposed. Before humans taught me that the worst answer to any challenge was not to try. I will meet you there at 1800 hours, I said. Jake extended his hand. I gripped it firmly, having long since adapted to the human greeting ritual. You know what, Vornak? He said. I think we are going to make an honorary human out of you yet. I sincerely hope not. One species of reality-denying optimists is sufficient for galactic stability. Reality-denying optimists. I am putting that on a shirt. As I walked away, datapad in hand, already researching proper rock climbing technique and calculating failure probabilities that I was absolutely going to ignore, I realized something profound.
I was happy.
Not satisfied. Not content. Actually happy. The kind of happiness that comes from knowing you are going to attempt something difficult, probably fail several times, and eventually succeed through sheer stubbornness. The kind of happiness that comes from growth. The kind of happiness that humans had been trying to share with the galaxy all along. Maybe they were not insane. Maybe they just understood something the rest of us had forgotten. That life was not about avoiding failure. It was about attempting the impossible, failing spectacularly, learning from the experience, and trying again with better technique and more determination. Maybe the universe was not a fixed set of rules to be calculated and accepted. Maybe it was a challenge to be met with a smile and an attitude of let us see what happens. 3 months later, I successfully climbed a vertical surface rated as intermediate difficulty for human standards. It took me 7 attempts, 2 pulled gripping appendages, and more swearing in Quelthian than I had done in my entire previous life. But I did it, and Jake was right there at the top, having climbed alongside me for support, wearing that insufferable smile. How does it feel? He asked. I looked down at how far I had climbed, calculated the probability that past me would have even attempted such a thing, came up with a number so close to 0 that it was statistically indistinguishable from impossible. Then I smiled, actually smiled. A genuine expression of satisfaction and pride that felt foreign on my facial structure but somehow completely natural. It feels like progress, I said. Progress is good. What do you want to try next? And that was the thing about humans. There was always a next challenge, always something harder to attempt, always another impossible thing waiting to be proven negotiable. It should have been exhausting. Instead, it was exhilarating. My final report to the Galactic Council was submitted 5 years after that first meeting with Jake in the cargo bay. 10,000 pages had become 50,000. Documentation of not just human capabilities, but of how those capabilities spread to other species, how cultures changed when they adopted human philosophies, how civilizations evolved when they stopped accepting limitations as fixed. The conclusion was simple. Humans were not a threat to galactic stability. They were a catalyst for galactic evolution. They challenged every species they encountered to reconsider their assumptions, test their boundaries, and push toward growth rather than stagnation. Some species would reject this influence. Some would embrace it partially, some would dive in completely and emerge transformed. All of them would be changed by the encounter, because that was what humans did. They smiled at impossibility. They lifted what should not be lifted. They ran distances that should not be run. They attempted things that should not be attempted. and they made the rest of us wonder if maybe, just maybe, we had been selling ourselves short all along. The council accepted my recommendations. Formal integration protocols were established. Cultural exchange programs became standard. Human training methodologies were adapted for multiple species. The galaxy did not become human, but it became more human-influenced, and that made all the difference. I eventually retired from the Quelthian Standards Board, took a position as director of the Interspecies Training Initiative, spent my days teaching other species to push past their limitations, challenge their assumptions, and smile at impossibility. It was the best decision I ever made. Jake and I still work together. He runs the physical training programs. I handle the psychological conditioning and documentation. Between us, we have helped thousands of beings from hundreds of species discover that they were capable of more than they believed. We still argue about physics. He still smiles at my calculations. I still document his flagrant violations of biological possibility. But now, when I see him lift something that should be impossible, or watch him push past limitations that should be absolute, I do not react with scientific horror. I react with curiosity, with anticipation, with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing that impossible is just a starting point. Because humans taught me the most important lesson I ever learned. Limitations are real. Physics is real. Biology is real. But so is growth. So is adaptation. So is the power of looking at impossibility and saying, yeah, but what if I try anyway? And sometimes, more often than rational beings should probably admit, trying anyway works. The universe is not as fixed as we thought. Reality is not as rigid as we calculated. Possibility is wider than we imagined. We just needed someone to smile at the impossible and lift it anyway to show us. Thank the stars for humans. Even if they are completely insane,